In Colorado, we have certain mandatory sentences that exist. One of those are what are called crimes of violence. Crimes of violence are sentencing enhancers. It's essentially the legislature placing into law certain offenses that if you're convicted, you must go to prison. And what happens on crimes of violence, and typically it's an assault type of case, very serious types of offenses, certain sexual assaults can be crimes of violence, a person is facing mandatory prison. And it depends on the level of felony that a person is accused of, but it's important that if you see the charges that include a crime of violence, that a person is potentially facing mandatory prison. And what it does is it places a tremendous amount of pressure on the case, because if you go to trial and lose on a case like that, a person is facing mandatory prison. So for example, on a mandatory class 4 felony, and we'll just for the sake of this conversation call it a second-degree assault, a person can be facing 5 to 16 years in prison based upon that. And there has been some recent changes to the law to eliminate some mandatory sentences on certain types of second-degree assault cases. But on a class 4 felony, you could be looking at a mandatory 5 to 16 years in prison. And with those crimes of violence, you have to serve 75% of that time in prison by statute. So they're very serious and difficult cases. When you get into certain class 3 felonies, which can be a first-degree assault, you could be facing 10 to 32 years with 75% based upon the type of felony. And with sex offenses and crimes of violence, you can get into mandatory prison sentences along with indeterminate sentences that may exist. It's important to hire an experienced, trained attorney to help represent you on these types of cases because the penalties now are just so extreme.